Apocalypse Chime, 2 mana artifact, pay 2, tap it, sacrifice the chime to bury all cards from the Homelands expansion. Thing they used to do was, have a single card that could deal with cards from that set, but it's not really a thing anymore. This is a bad card because I don't think anyone really plays Homelands cards because they're weak anyway, so it's just crap. Soldevi Golem, 4 mana for a 5/3 artifact creature. It doesn't untap during the untap phase. You can pay 0 and untap another creature that an opponent controls, and in return you get to untap Soldevi Golem at the end of your upkeep. You can only use the ability during your upkeep, so it's pretty badly templated. It's not very strong. It's just a generic card, and again, having a 5/3 artifact creature doesn't really win games, so even if it had some kind of downside that is easily negated, it doesn't really make it a good card anyway. Winter's Chill, X and blue. It's an instant. Cast the spell only during combat before blockers are declared. X can't be greater than the number of snowlands you control. You choose X target attacking creatures, and then for each of those creatures, a controller has to pay 1 mana or 2 mana. If the player doesn't pay any mana, you destroy the card at the end of combat. For the ones that they paid 1 mana for, those creatures don't deal and don't receive combat damage. The ones that they paid 2 mana for, those creatures would deal damage normally. It's actually an okay card. It's fairly strong. If you have another way to shut that opponent out from making the mana payments, they're low on mana, they're tapped out, that kind of thing, they get hosed. So it's a pretty strong card, and it can kill more than one creature, so it's got that viability there. It's probably a bit too wordy, a bit too many exception clauses. That's probably why no one really picks up on it being anything special. I think it's got potential, but the market says it's rubbish. So, Homeridge Shaman, 2 and 2 blue for a 2/1. So it's a 2/1 creature, and then you can pay 1 blue to tap a green creature. Okay, it's not the worst. It's pretty good. I mean, just tapping a green creature for a blue mana is useful. But it's a creature, and they're the most easily destroyed permanents in the game, so keeping it on the board is already a struggle. But, I mean, it's not a bad card, so I'd say it's somewhat playable. Maybe it should retain some value, but not a lot. Winter Sky, 1 red. Flip a coin, target opponent calls heads or tails. If the flipper ends up in your favor, Winter Sky deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. Otherwise, each player draws a card. It's actually not a bad card. I mean, if you want to use it to deal damage to creatures and players, you can use it that way. If you want to use it to draw a card, that's also good. But you don't get to really pick which one is going to happen, so you need to have a way to benefit regardless of the outcome. Now, drawing a card, you don't really need to do anything to benefit from that, but you probably want to have some way to make the 1 damage to each player and each creature generate some kind of benefit for you, and then this card is just a nice thing, extra thing to have. So yeah, it's an okay card. Covetous Dragon, 4 and a red for a 6/5 flying. So it's a pretty good rate for a creature. When you control no artifacts, sacrifice Covetous Dragon. So that's a pretty big downside. You've got to have artifacts, but then it should be pretty easy to maintain artifacts in play if you're playing this kind of card because you've built around it. But then again, in the end, it's only a 6/5 flying dragon, and creatures that are just there to deal damage or block are not really things that people treat as game winning anymore. That's not how the game is played. Delif's Cube, 1 mana artifact. Pay 2 and tap it. This turn, when target creature you control attacks and isn't blocked, it assigns no combat damage this turn, and you put a counter on Delif's Cube. Anytime you can pay 2, remove a counter, and regenerate target creature. So this is the kind of card that overvalues regeneration. Back then it must have been a good thing. It's okay-ish now. You got to jump through a hoop to be able to regenerate a creature once. It's not the worst kind of card, but it's pretty mediocre. So that's why its value is unlikely to move. Preferred selection: 2 and 2 green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your draw phase, look at the top 2 cards of your library, choose one and put it on the bottom of your library. Or you can sacrifice preferred selection and pay 4 mana, 2 and 2 green being the 4 mana, and you get to draw the card instead. So it's not such a bad card. I mean, it's sort of Sylvan Library-esque. You pay 4 mana, but then you get to filter 2 cards every turn. It's okay. It's not the worst card. It's a bit better than mediocre, but it's just not abusable, so it doesn't really get that halo effect from being oh no, busted card, gonna win the game on the spot. But it gives you some kind of residual advantage for having it in play. In green it's probably quite strong, but not the best. Via Shivan Dragon, 2 red and 2 green for a 4/4 flying. Okay, this is from the days when Shivan Dragon was, oh my god, such a great card, and then they played on that trope over and over again. So this is a 6 mana 4/4 flying, pretty average, maybe even below average, not really good. And then you can pay a red, +1/+0 until end of turn, fire breathing, pay 1 green, +0/+1 till end of turn, so buffing the toughness. It's just a creature in the end of the day, so it's got all the disadvantages of being just a beater and not being prized enough these days. Tolarian Serpent, 5 and 2 blue for a 7/7. Okay, it's nice. During your upkeep, put the top 7 cards of your library into your graveyard. Okay, so if you've got some way to benefit from cards going into your graveyard, this is okay, but it costs so much to play that when are you going to start taking advantage of this? I mean, unless you're recurring it from the graveyard and putting it into play, there's really no big deal to have a 7/7. It's not going to really attack beneficially when it doesn't have trample, doesn't have evasion, so it's a mediocre card, not broken once again, so it doesn't maintain a very high value. Autumn Willow, 4 and 2 green for a 4/4. It's less than ideal. Cannot be the target of spells or effects, so hexproof kind of thing back in the day. That's the whole reason to play it. It's a good card in that respect. And it's got ability, 1 green, target player may target Autumn Willow with spells or effects until end of turn. Okay, so you just turn it off for yourself for a turn, and then you can suit it up with some enchantments, or cast any other spells you want on it. Mediocre card, nothing special, unlikely to ever be worth anything. Urtai's Familiar, 1 and a blue for a 2/2 with phasing. Okay, so it's a mediocre creature. If it leaves play, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, and you can pay a blue to prevent it phasing out until your next turn. So is this kind of thing really good? Do people really want to dump cards in their graveyard? Well, there are a few options to do it, and when that becomes a very strong strategy, that's when people will go out and just pick up all the cards that do this kind of thing, putting cards from the library into the graveyard, and you'll see a spike in prices. But at this time, those things don't exist, so it's not forcing upward pressure on this card. Kudzu, 1 and 2 green. Okay, you play it onto a land. When the land becomes tapped, it's destroyed, unless it was the last land in play. The kudzu doesn't go to the graveyard. Instead, the player whose land it just destroyed puts it on another land. So it just keeps going around and stopping people from tapping their lands unless they want to lose it. It's pretty strong. You put it on a really good land that needs to be tapped for its effect to happen, and then it gives that player only a one-time use effect. It's okay as lands get better. This gets a bit stronger, but it still costs a fair bit of mana for an effect that the person, your opponent, gets to choose how badly it affects them, which is not very good. That's in the game of Magic. You don't want to give your opponent many options to how to deal with the game going forward. So it's a bit weaker in that respect, but it should have a somewhat a middle ground value, but it shouldn't be worth a lot. Mystic Decree, 2 and 2 blue for an enchantment. All creatures lose flying and island walk. Okay, not sure how much you want to make creatures lose flying and island walk. Is that really hurting you? If it is, this is a great card, helps you out heaps, but otherwise it's 4 mana to do something that maybe isn't even a part of the game. Like, if no one's playing creatures with flying or island walk, it doesn't do anything. So, bad card all round, really. Temporal Aperture, 2 mana artifact. Pay 5, tap it, shuffle your library, and reveal a top card. Until the end of turn, as long as that card remains on the top of your library, you may play the card as though it was in your hand, without paying the casting cost. So it's a pretty strong card. I mean, if you're paying 5 and tapping it, then you want the benefit being some card that ends up being revealed is better, costs a lot more than 5 mana, because then you're getting the reduction in casting cost. Like 10 mana spell, bam, you got it for 5 mana. That'd be great. So you just be putting this into a deck with nothing but high casting cost cards, and it's always hitting something good. I think in the future this can only get better, as maybe there are more and more high impact cards at high mana costs, and then one day there'll be a deck that you just play all of the big mana cost stuff, and then a handful of these kind of cards that trip you up and put them into play, and then you get, end up getting Emrakul for 5 mana. Musician, 2 and a blue for a 1/3 creature, cumulative upkeep of 1. You can tap it to put a music counter on a target creature, and during that creature's controller's upkeep, he or she pays 1 for each music counter, or the creature is destroyed. Fairly okay kind of card. The cumulative upkeep makes it really bad, but in a game of mana denial, somebody gets a creature on the board, then you can use this to tax them out of mana and eventually destroy the creature. Not really the kind of play that's at the forefront of Magic anymore, so unlikely to be worth much.